Welcome to Lawyers Without Billboards, where we break down family law and other areas of the law. No gimmicks, no legal jargon, just real, unfiltered talk from real lawyers. Join your hosts, Steve, Patty, Jimmy, and Alexa, partners at Shewmaker Lewis, a law firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Every episode, they tackle the legal questions that matter most: divorce, custody, child support, alimony, and everything in between. They'll pull back the curtain to give you real insights on what happens inside the courtroom and beyond.
What's up, y'all? How you doing?
Good. Doing good. How are
Finished
you?
playing with your pens over there? I think this marks the first time we've done a podcast with a guest. And the guest is Adeline. We call her Addie. Mm-hmm. Who is Addie?
Addie is my tiny 7-pound kitty, my little tuxedo who travels the world with us.
She does. She's been hiking with us. She's been to Europe.
Let's see. She's been to Italy, France, the Netherlands. She's going to Switzerland. She's going to Ireland this year. We took her to St. Thomas with us.
She's
for
also
spring
going
break.
to Spain this year.
Oh,
so she's been to more countries than most human beings have.
That's correct,
All right.
yes.
Well, before we talk about why Addie's here, because there's a reason why Addie's here, before we're talking about that, got to lead in with something. Most people, well, you guys know a little bit, but most people don't know that my first job, legit job, was at a movie theater.
What was your first not legit job?
Oh, like cutting grass and stuff like that. But I think the name of the movie theater was the East Side Cinema. It was on the south side of the bypass in Montgomery, Alabama, near the Governor's House Hotel and the Montgomery Mall. All these places are defunct now. They're gone. Yeah.
The flea market Montgomery?
Near, yes, actually very close to where Flea Market Montgomery was. So the East Side Movie Theater, I lied about my age in the summer of '83. I was 14. You had to be 16 to get a legit job. I lied about my age because I was just so tired of cutting grass. I wanted a job with air conditioning, even if it paid.
And nobody back then checked IDs.
Evidently
it just wasn't
not.
a thing.
Evidently not. I interviewed well with Roy Singleton, the manager at the time. And and he actually paid me $2.85 an hour, which was less than minimum wage, which I gladly accepted because, as I said, I had air conditioning in the summertime. So I worked this movie theater, and other than Roy, who I found his porn magazine stash upstairs one day. That's an interesting story in and of itself. But I could actually thread those old-timey movie projectors, which I couldn't do now, but because it was elaborate. You don't even know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just, I feel like you wouldn't necessarily lose the skill, would you?
Oh yeah. That's extremely perishable. But anyway, because it was complicated. But in any event, I could do that. I ran the concession stand.
It feels so simple. I don't know.
I did all the jobs at this movie theater, and other than Roy, the two people that left a lasting impression on me for the time I worked there. I only worked there about a year, 83, 84. But was Becky Mosley, who I still keep in touch with. She has a couple of kids that are grown, lives in Montgomery still. And then Electa Burrows, who tragically, she taught me how to drive stick shift and then tragically died a year later. That's a whole other story. But
Wait,
the point...
Were those two things related?
No, I'm just telling a story.
And her dying?
Well, okay, my dad, who is just a horrible teacher, taught me how to drive stick shift, except he didn't really. So Barry Nathanson, our firm financial manager, and Electa Burrows both taught me how to drive stick shift. And I remember them today. I'm indebted to them. But the point is, I worked in this movie theater from the summer of 83 until about the spring of 84. So working in this theater, there were so many movies that I saw over and over and over again. And this was a great time for movies. I mean, I saw Red Dawn, a very controversial classic today that my wife hasn't even seen.
Nope.
Same.
Places in the Heart, which made me a John Malkovich fan forever.
Waterworld.
No, not Waterworld, Jimmy. Beverly Hills Cop, okay? The Twilight Zone, Mr. Mom, Risky Business. But why am I telling this story? Because one of those movies that I saw over and over and over again was Revenge of the Nerds.
What a terrible movie.
A movie.
Never seen it.
A movie that you should see, but a lot of people say it hasn't weathered the times. It's now considered to be extremely politically incorrect. But you should watch it because it's a movie about college fraternities. And Jimmy, the reason I'm telling the story is Jimmy Lewis, my partner over there, my law firm partner, is clearly...
I wasn't sure what you meant.
Clearly Jimmy is an alpha beta. Would you agree, Patty?
It's, yes, yeah.
And you are clearly an omega mu.
Thanks a lot.
No, that's a compliment, right? I think so. Anyway.
This is so lost on me right now.
Then you got to watch the movie. All right, well, that was our lead-in, so let's talk about pets.
Let's talk about Addie for a minute. No, okay. All right.
Wait, doesn't Addie... can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
I apologize. Addie has an Instagram page.
Addie has an Instagram page. Yes, Addie is a world traveler, so she has an Instagram page.
Where do we find it?
Addie Travels _. So ADDY Travels __ on Instagram.
You know, that's some real white people stuff right there.
I know.
Okay.
But, okay, so to be fair, I didn't have an Instagram for her. This was not because I was like, oh, she really needs one. We were in a store in Amsterdam, and we were walking around shopping with Addie because she likes to shop. And she likes to walk around.
Addie likes to shop.
You know it's true. Y'all have seen her shop.
Wait, I got to hit the bullshit king.
True story. So
Okay.
anyway, so we walk into the store. She's on her leash. She's walking around. Of course, the same reaction we normally get is, oh my God, is that a cat? Yeah, it's a cat. Can I pet her?
Whoa. You're talking about people with like glasses or contacts
No.
or 20/20 vision within 2 arms lengths, and they come up to you and go, oh my God, is that a cat?
Yeah, because they can never believe that a cat would walk around on a leash, or most people, of course, walk around with their dogs when they are shopping in these stores. So we're in a store, and we're walking around. It's the Fendi store in Amsterdam. And they decide they were going to put a little coat on her, which is her Instagram profile picture. But she's wearing her little Fendi coat, and of course they said, can we take pictures? I said, absolutely. Well, can we tag her? Well, shit. Hold on. Let me make an Instagram real quick for Addie. So then, yes, her very first followers were employees at the Fendi store in Amsterdam. So shout out to the Amsterdam Fendi store.
When you were in Amsterdam, did you go into McDonald's?
No.
Burger King?
No.
Okay.
No.
No, Steve is on. This is something, right? When you go to other countries, go to McDonald's because it's such a different experience than going to McDonald's here in the United States. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, the apple pies that I'm old enough to remember being really, really good in McDonald's here in the States are that good today in Kuwait City.
Because they're actually fried.
Absolutely. The
Interesting.
McDonald's in Madrid was fabulous.
I don't eat McDonald's here. I really try not to eat fast food anywhere.
Would you do me a favor?
What?
When you go to Europe next
Yeah.
time, which I think is in a couple of weeks, right?
Yes.
Eat at a McDonald's in Europe.
So what's
We'll see.
actually funny about that is we're going to Switzerland in a month, and multiple of the places I just keep telling her, I'm like, hey, guess what's a block away from
Right
our
next
hotel?
door.
A McDonald's. And she, of course, her face is,
We'll see.
ugh.
We'll see.
Are you going to set up a Swiss bank account while you're there?
You know, it's probably not the worst idea.
All I can think about is that scene in The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I just see Jimmy doing stuff like that.
You know, maybe.
It's like the whole-
We'll check it out.
I mean,
Go ahead.
less on the cocaine side of things, but
It's like I said, the whole
good.
time.
That's
The whole
good.
time I see Jimmy in Italy, because y'all have been to Italy how many times?
3?
Yeah, the whole time. Four.
4.
Math is
Long
hard.
Florence.
Oh, you're right.
The whole time I picture in my head Jimmy in Italy, I see Brad Pitt in *Inglourious Bastards*. Buongiorno, you know, like that's all you could say, and you look like Brad Pitt. You got the shoulders, you know, probably the same suit size. Like, Buongiorno. Every time I see that on HBO, I'm like, that's Jimmy in Italy.
He knows a few more words, but you're not too far off.
Is that right?
You're not too far off.
All right.
Anyway,
So
back
what,
on
are,
topic.
what are we talking about?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So we started.
Business.
All right. So we're talking about pets and divorce. So I know in Georgia we
Wait,
look at.
pets can get divorced?
I mean, I guess maybe. I don't know how they do it, but pets in divorce, as in when we're representing people in divorces and they have pets, how are they treated in the divorce?
As personal property.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Pets are property.
Except they're not everywhere.
They are living and breathing property
Correct.
that emotional attachments run to. Now, you could have an emotional attachment to a piece of art or a set of golf clubs, sure, but they're not living and breathing.
Correct.
So I'm going to grant you that.
Yeah. Well, so many states, like the state of Georgia, treat animals, treat pets as personal property, as in like your suitcases and your beds and your couches, where basically it's we're going to use, you know, who wants them. And if we're going to fight over them, we're going to get to this episode later, we're going to fight over them like pots and pans, right?
We flip a coin.
Right.
You pick first and then
Right.
I pick.
Exactly. And if we have 2 pets, well, one of you gets each, which of course we all have multiple animals. How tragic would that be?
Time out there, and I want to go off topic just slightly, but it's not a sidebar because we're close to the topic. We have Addie here.
We have Addie
who's
here.
resting her head.
Yep.
But don't you have other pets?
Yes, we have 3 dogs.
Tell
We
us
have-
about them.
We have 2 Doberman Pinschers and a German Shepherd.
And I
Excuse
call
me.
your Dobermans Zeus and Apollo, which is a
Correct.
reference completely lost on you.
It's not lost on me. I
Okay.
know what it's from. I've never
Okay.
seen it, but I know what it's from.
All right.
So Zach and Zoe are our 2 Dobies. Zoe is now 13, almost 13. We've got some health issues, but she's still doing okay.
Some
And
health issues.
I call them razor blades with legs.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
because they
That's
don't
because
like
you like
them. They don't like me.
Zoe likes
That's
you
not
just fine. You just
true.
bark at Zach and you make him nervous.
That's true.
And then Ace is our 2-year-old German Shepherd who's a psychopath, but he's a very good boy. He's just very floofy.
Shall we talk about our pet extravaganza?
Let's hear about your, yes.
Patty and I have Elsa, who is technically a plot hound, a black plot hound, which is genetically almost identical to a Labrador. And I do have to say thank you. I have an eternal gratitude to Cheryl Champion, a lawyer, a good friend of ours over in Marietta, or as Cheryl would correct you, Mayretta.
Mayretta.
And she actually hooked us up with a litter that had been dumped on their Alabama farm, and we got Elsa 10 years ago. Elsa's now the gray old lady of the house.
And it's actually 12 years ago.
12 years ago,
Going on 12
excuse
years
me.
ago.
Yeah, you're right. And then a few years ago, about 6 years ago, Molly, our daughter, wanted another dog, a puppy, and I've always wanted a German short-haired pointer. Having done absolutely no research on how wired they are, I just thought they were beautiful. We got a GSP from a very nice couple in Prattville, Alabama, and we paid several $100s for she's a purebred GSP. She's got papers. She's like royalty, and she's obnoxious as hell.
She's a runt, too. She's little.
She is, but she's beautiful in her way. But even the several $100s we paid for her, which was a deal, there was one agency up in North Georgia that wanted to do a home visit and wanted to do a criminal check, and they wanted several multiples in price from what we paid for Cookie. And I remember talking to these people, and I said, "We're talking about a dog here," and they were offended that I responded that way. But then we buckled down less than a year ago, and we got our third pet. Patty, why don't you take it away and tell us about the third pet?
Our third pet is a horse, Parsifal. And
Which, go ahead.
we just love him.
Wait,
We got
hold on.
him from a drug dealer in Houston.
He was not a drug dealer. We don't know that.
Well, you gotta
Okay,
say
he was a
it's-
Mexican dude who lives in Mexico and he keeps a horse in Houston. That's called a drug dealer, right, Jimmy?
No. The horse.
A cartelio.
No
You
comment.
gotta say his full name, though. He's got a whole
his,
thing.
His
The gangster?
No, the
No,
horse. His registered name. His registered name is Sarah Perot Moore. But we all call him Parsifal or Parsi for short. He's an Andalusian. He's got papers as well.
Purebred, yeah.
And
Trained to the Grand Prix level in dressage.
he is shown to the Grand Prix level in dressage.
And he has the personality of a big, playful dog.
Yeah, of a puppy dog.
Right. But,
And if he could crawl in your lap and sit in your lap, he would.
oh, he would. And without saying how much we paid for him, because we're not going to do that, I would just say that we did the math, or I did the math, and we could have purchased 612 German short-haired pointers like Cookie for what we paid for her for one Parsi. And that just beats the shit out of 101 Dalmatians. 612 GSPs. I mean, that would destroy your house, you know.
Destroy several
Everything.
houses.
Yeah, that
the
would
whole
destroy
neighborhood.
everything.
So we did slightly digress.
Yeah,
but
Well, a little bit, but if we're going to talk about how we acquired said animals, Addie was free from the Gwinnett County Animal Shelter. Zach and Zoe each came from some people, 2 different groups of people in Marietta who probably their first,
Mayretta,
excuse me,
thank
you're
you.
right.
Thank you, Jimmy.
who it was probably their first breeding ever. And then Ace we bought at Costco.
Costco sells dogs?
No, but Costco truck driver in parking lot sold dog.
Was he running like a taco stand?
No, he evidently really wanted to recoup the $400 he spent on Ace, who is a purebred German Shepherd with papers.
Really?
And I happened to have $355 in cash, and we walked away with a purebred German Shepherd on a Saturday afternoon between my birthday and Jimmy's.
I'm actually surprised you were walking around with that light.
I never carry cash.
All right.
I was shocked. Anyway, back on topic.
So let's talk about this, right? So you guys have 4 pets.
Yeah.
You and Jimmy divorced.
No.
Who gets the pets?
I know
so-
I get Ace. I know she gets Addie.
Yeah,
Zach
no,
and Zoe are
no
going to be a
question
fight.
there. Yeah, Zach and Zoe would be a fight because Acey's definitely his dog and Addie is clearly my cat. So I think it would really come down to a fight between us on Zach and Zoe.
I will say this morning though.
Oh, this morning he could have her.
I got up at 4 o'clock this morning. Had to change Zoe's diaper. Yes, Zoe's diaper.
Yeah.
Take her out, get her cleaned up, put a new diaper on her, put her back to bed, then go back upstairs, go to bed, get up at 6 o'clock again when she was barking again, take her out, change her diaper. So
So he can have her.
I probably got dibs on
But let's
on
talk
Zoe.
about this, because have you guys ever had cases where you guys have set up a visitation
Yes.
schedule
Mm-hmm.
with the
Yes.
pets? So
Yes.
would you guys do a visitation schedule?
I can't even comprehend the idea of us divorcing and not living together. So,
But you would
we'd
divorce
have
and still live together?
No,
That makes
I
no
mean,
sense.
Yeah,
I
totally.
I can't comprehend the idea of divorcing, but also not living together.
Okay, all right, stop.
No.
Let's not make it Jimmy and Alexa because they can't get past
Yeah,
that.
no,
Let's talk
can't.
about a married couple with
Yeah.
pets and
Well,
what we're doing.
Here,
Okay.
I dealt with this in a case a couple years ago that the parties, I mean, they were in their late 20s. They'd been married a year or so, and they'd gotten a dog when they had first started dating. The dog was maybe 2 years old, and they wanted to set up a whole visitation schedule with it. And I represented the husband, and I flat told him, I was like, look, because he was going to keep the dog primarily, but she wanted visitation with it, and I basically said, look, all this is doing is dragging y'all's life together on. Frankly, we need to draw a line in the sand and say, no, we're not doing this, because it's not like this is something that's so well established for such a long period of time. I mean, I realized that was kind of mean and draconian, but ultimately...
Well,
like,
they were divorcing, right?
Well, yeah, and it was, look, y'all don't have a kid.
So you
And
didn't do it, is what
no,
you're saying?
No,
Which
is we just kind of drew a line in the sand. We were like, no, that's
Which is
a
interesting.
no-go.
Which is interesting because I have had the case where we did do it.
I've done it.
And it's important for people to understand who are listening. We can do this by agreement.
Yeah.
But if you were to take this issue to a judge,
No, a judge is not going to, I really don't think most judges are going to force that upon people.
Well, hang on. A judge in Georgia won't. A judge in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, Montana, several others wouldn't. However, I did some research, and we have some differences in the law across the U.S. where there are some states that will.
like which ones?
Okay, so
Tell us.
let's get into some fun stuff here. So Tennessee, ads. Tennessee, we're going to treat them as personal property, but we're also going to include them as separate or marital property.
Just let her
So
go.
if you purchase your animal prior to getting married, regardless of paying for vet bills and all this other crap, they're separate property. Period. The end. They're separate. So whoever owned them before gets them, no matter what happened. Kentucky looks at certain factors of who was the primary care person of the pet. What's the well-being and the happiness of the pet? Shit you not, that's in the law. Indiana.
Wait. All
Yeah.
right.
How do we judge that?
We gotta pause here for a second. I mean, let's see. I guess with Parsi, I could bring in, Molly's coach, and have her testify about, Parsi's well-being
Yep.
and happiness.
No. You don't have to get there because if we get divorced, I'm going to say, Judge, she can go and she can leave with the horse she rode in on. You can have that horse.
But you get the dogs.
But hold on.
All right.
If you guys were in Indiana, they're still personal property. However, the court can consider the fair market value of the pet in the division of personal property. So Steve could say, here's how much we paid. Patty, you keep the horse, but I get this instead.
Okay, it's interesting what you're saying because I failed to pull the case that I meant to pull before we started today. Within the last 2 or 3 years, there was an Indiana Court of Appeals case, and I could almost quote it, and it said, we are not going to consider handling pets other than as property. We're not going to handle them like children because our courts are already backlogged enough with
Yeah.
cases that have heavy considerations like child custody. We're not going to do that. So what I'm learning from you right now in your research, Alexa, is that you've looked across a number of states that aren't rising to the level of custody determinations, but they may be using factors like Georgia. In previous episodes, we've talked about Georgia has a code section 1993, and in that section for child custody determinations, there are, I think, 14 or 15, 17 factors. What you're telling us is that there are factors that other states are putting in the law about how to divide pets, but they're still property at the end of the day?
You're jumping ahead of me.
Am I?
I'm
Okay.
telling you about some of them, but let's keep going.
Okay.
So Illinois looks at, they're still personal property, but recent changes as of 2018 recognize the emotional bond between the party and the pet. So we're looking at almost like custody considerations because they literally talk about the best interest of the pet. They also allow for joint ownership akin to shared custody.
This
is
Illinois?
Illinois. Okay, wait.
Okay,
wait,
keep going.
I got more.
Oh, no. Before that,
Yeah.
what do you guys think of that? Is that bad, or is that good, and that's the way the law should be going?
Jimmy,
personally,
no, stop. Jimmy, what do you think?
Good or bad? Yay or nay? Go with your gut.
Honestly, I think it's bad because
I do
I,
too.
I disagree.
I think if we are talking about children, yes, you guys are going to be linked together forever. And frankly, you're going to have to deal with all of your crap and hopefully put that aside and be good co-parents.
Okay.
Pets are look, y'all know how much I love my dogs, but pets are far more finite. And frankly, especially, it's one thing if there are children involved, and here, maybe the pets are going with the kids, because I've done that in a plan before. That here, the dog, when the parents exchange the kids, the dog's going with them. And that was more of a that's easier for the kids kind of thing. Right. But I think, especially like the case I talked about a second ago, that if the parties don't have children and you want them to share custody of a pet, I think that is just
Okay.
I think that's a train wreck.
Alexa, what do you think?
So I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. I think in that particular instance where they've been married a year, I think that's a pretty simple division of property, right? But I think if you're talking about people have birds that they live like 30 freaking years, and they spend tons and tons of money to buy these birds, and people are very attached to their birds. I don't understand bird people, but whatever. But I think absolutely, if there's an emotional attachment to both parties, I definitely think you can consider this.
How do you get emotionally attached to a bird?
I don't know. I don't get the bird thing. I told you that.
Okay, I take the middle of the road position between you and Jimmy. Here's what I think. I think at the end of the day, pets remain as property, but I think that the child custody factors that we have in Georgia under 1993 and many of the factors that you just laid out, Alexa, from other states, should be used by the court to make a determination. Now, it's important for listeners to understand that in Georgia, there are no such factors in the law regarding pets and how they're divided. So my position is that Georgia, like many other states, should have factors in the law that guide judges on how to determine which party gets a pet. But at the end of that, that pet is property and goes with that person, which is where I agree with Jimmy.
Yeah, but aren't those going to be similar factors that a judge would consider for any personal property?
Yes.
Furniture,
Yes.
couches,
Yes,
beds.
which is why for pets, which are living and breathing things that have a very deep emotional attraction, I think that the law should codify those factors for pets. But at the end of that, it's a decision in property. And many judges I've talked to, I think Judge Farmer down in Fulton, Kevin Farmer, and I had that conversation. I think it was him. That if I'm wrong, then I apologize. But they had, some of them have said, we'll look at those factors, but it's not in the law that they have to. I think it should be, but at the end of that analysis, once the pet is awarded to one party, it's property and we're done. These judges that want to say the pet will go back and forth, that's not the law in Georgia.
Right. Have you ever seen a judge in Georgia do that?
Me personally, no. I've only heard about it.
Okay. Have you guys seen
No.
a judge in? Okay.
No, but let me give you a couple more. But
Please.
there's one other thing I want to say about this is when it comes to the fact that a lot of people, particularly like our age and whatnot, aren't having kids, they're electing to be pet parents instead. I think this is recognizing that there has been a change in like the traditional, we're going to get married, have kids, because it's not as common anymore. So I think it's kind of looking at it as these people look at their fur babies as their kids.
Even more reason to codify the factors in the law.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
California, which I kind of expected, California in 2019 formally recognizes the emotional bond between the person and the pet, and they consider specific factors of who adopted or purchased the pet, who spends the most time, who feeds it, who walks it, spends time taking it to the vet, things of that nature, and they have a potential for sole or joint custody orders. Crazy, right?
That's some crazy stuff.
That's crazy
And I
stuff.
disagree with that.
I think that's a lot, but I also think, again, people not having kids, their pets are their kids. At least the custody order's not going to go anywhere near as long. At least,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay.
Depends on the pet.
But if it's a bird,
Okay, time out. We're going to have to revisit this in future episodes because I think we need to track appellate cases in California to see how this plays out.
Right.
Because I want to see how the California courts are entertaining this.
I got 3 more for you that I want to bring up.
Okay.
Maine doesn't go as far as California, but they definitely look at the importance of the pet's well-being, and they encourage the judge to determine who gets the pet by considering emotional attachment, the pet's well-being, past care, future care ability, your financial stability and ability to take care of the pet, and whether or not there's been domestic violence or abuse. Because if there's been
toward the animal or
either
between
way,
the couple?
either way, because if it's between the couple, there's a potential for animal abuse in the future. Literally in their statute.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I'll bet you domestic violence advocates would tell you if
Yeah.
the victim can't talk, that it's even more likely that abuse will be delivered
Yeah.
on the animal. I
Right?
agree with that.
Well, and I've had the case where there was abuse in the family, which included abuse to the animal,
Yeah.
which I still find abhorrent. But I looked at Nebraska. Nebraska, personal property, but if you can prove you had ownership, whoever's name is on the animal, done.
That pig's in my name.
Right.
Well, I was gonna say that's a bigger deal in Nebraska, okay? Because we're talking cows and pigs and
Yep.
goats and sheep.
yeah, but
Yep.
I would think that
Chickens.
livestock is kind of a separate category.
I didn't exactly research livestock versus pets, but you may be right.
I mean, I think if we're talking
Yeah.
here, this farm and this head of cat, like, I think that's a completely separate category other than
Right.
don't know.
pets. I mean, unless you got Bessie coming in the kitchen.
Maybe you're
We
next
had-
to do that one.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
We had a lot of cows that were pets for a while.
I already talked about Omega Moose.
And then
we,
they were
till
dinner.
we ate them.
Then they were
till
dinner.
we ate them.
I already talked about
And
Omega
they-
Moose
and-
in this episode. So.
All right,
they
I got
were-
one more. I got one more. New York
pets were
law,
delicious.
2021. They are no longer just personal property. The court shall consider the best interest when deciding custody, similar to child custody determinations.
Wait, which state is this?
New York.
New York.
Primary care, pets' special needs, stability of each party's home, who spends the most time with the pet also. Ownership prior to marriage, of course, makes it a separate property, but if you jointly own, the court can order one party to purchase the other party's interest.
Can I ask you a question? In
Absolutely.
your research, did you run across anything like pet support?
No, I didn't see
Okay.
anything about pet support, but the only thing I did see about money was the financial stability of the parties.
All right, second question, going back to California, which looks like it's leading the way, Illinois, California, New York.
Yeah.
What about modification of custody?
I haven't seen anything about modifying at this point, so I didn't research modification. I was really just looking at what they have right now.
We need to stay on this because I have an eye towards, okay, this is our base episode about pet custody,
Mm-hmm.
which we'll refer to in the future. But if we have appeals, appellate decisions where this is kind of fleshed out in these states, I want to revisit this.
Oh yeah,
And this could be this could be the future of family law, where
Yeah.
we're headed.
yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe how far some of these go. I mean, particularly with financial stability of the parties.
Okay, any indication of guardians ad litem being
Right.
assigned for pets?
I don't
We
know.
get the veterinarians involved. We need a custody evaluator. You take them to the vets.
Dog
You got
psychologist?
competing vet opinions.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
I want pet support for Zoe because her uncovered medical expenses are outrageous.
I take her to the vet. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've taken her to the vet
You should see
a lot.
Parsi.
Oh, yeah, I don't even want to
Yeah,
go there.
excuse me, y'all are cute. Our horse, the family.
My.
Stop.
Oh
stop,
man, I can't wait
stop.
for you to say my horse in front of a judge and
The-
the judge correct you to
Thank
our
you.
horse.
The family horse, Parsi. The family horse, Parsi. If I haven't already said it on these podcasts, he has chiropractic adjustments.
Yes.
He gets shots in his hocks, basically his
And
joints,
stifles.
so that he will
What's a stifle?
run better.
It's like you think about like his hip joint.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Have you gotten shots in your stifles?
That's
and
where
hocks?
I'm going with this. This horse gets better medical treatment than I get. I have a sore leg. I can't even get a massage
No.
from my wife.
Yeah, we even did a metabolic survey on him. to
Well,
see-
He had
Steve, you-
blood work recently,
Steve, you
right?
know
Yeah.
every time you have a sore leg, Patty asks me to take you out back and shoot you.
That's the basis of a TPO. All right. So what we're learning today is that states are evolving, and certain states are on the cusp of some very interesting things, and those would be the People's Crazy Republic of California and New York, and surprisingly Illinois, right in the
You got
heartland.
Chicago. You got Chicago there.
Well,
Yeah.
you got Chicago. So it's real interesting, and we need to really stay on top of this in the future and call our friends that we know in those states and
Yeah.
say, what the hell is up with y'all?
I think it's fascinating, and I do think it really is because of a lack of, couples having kids that the
Agreed.
law's evolving because that's what they're fighting over. They're fighting over the pets. Let me ask you guys something. If anything ever happened here, or when you guys have cases where they've got more than one pet, do you encourage them to split the pets up, or do you keep them together?
It depends, right? Like if in our case, Parsi and Cookie,
They don't know each other.
They don't know each other. They're not emotionally attached at all. Cookie and Elsa, they're
like a bonded pair.
Cookie likes Elsa. I don't think Elsa likes Cookie. But
That's fair.
But so there's an emotional attachment. So that I think you'd have to take into consideration when you're talking about splitting up pets.
You asked the question, so I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to kind of go off on a tangent. This is one of those areas of the law where knowing your judge would be essential, because if you were a judge, Alexa, I would want to know. Okay, this is a crazy cat dog lady. Okay, and she's absolutely going to jump on this. And if Patty was a judge, I'll be like, okay, this woman grew up on a farm, so she understands that animals are, as Jimmy said, finite. Their lifespans are usually shorter. And Patty's experience was, okay, we like this cow or pig, but we're going to eat this thing pretty soon. You'd want to know that stuff about your judge before you come in with either a bleeding heart or a callous heart on the issue.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting topic.
Good point.
Hey, look, yesterday I was in court in Gwinnett, and this was on an uncontested final hearing calendar that the other side just basically chose not to participate. And I told the judge, I said, look, we really only have 3 issues. It was only 2 in our proposed settlement agreement, but now it's 3 because we want attorney's fees because we're here for all that. I said, house needs to be sold. They bought it just 2 years ago. There's very little equity. She wants her dog back because he sent the dogs to his mom's house in Texas. And the judge was like, oh.
Not cool.
Yeah, that irritated the judge.
Which judge?
Judge Mason in Gwinnett.
Okay.
I have one more question for you guys before we go. What's the weirdest pet you've had to deal with in a divorce? Not cat, dog.
An African gray parrot.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't you have a bunny too?
Oh my God! Yes. Okay. No, I'm sorry. Not the African parrot. Yes, some rabbit that the opposing party had. He had moved to Montana, and he had taken the rabbit with him. And my client, who is local, wanted the rabbit. And I said, okay, how are we going to get the rabbit back? She goes, I'll drive to Montana and get the rabbit. And I said, how expensive was this rabbit? And she was like, I don't know, like $150. And I was like, you know what, you do you.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to do.
Hey, the emotional attachment. She would be killing it in some of these states with the emotional bond.
And it was just one of those where I
long
literally
drive.
just sat there and I was a little dumbfounded. And I was like, you are a woman with a very complicated job with a number of degrees, a remarkably intelligent woman doing very well for herself. And it was just one of those that, you can't put a price on some people's emotional connection
Can't
with
put
an
a
animal.
price on love.
First of all, I got to blow the bullshit can. The
doesn't like the bullshit
number of
can.
degrees is not an accurate indicator of a person's intelligence. But I have
are a perfect example.
And as are you, my friend. But I have a question for you. I'm going to quote you back to you. I said to her, you know what? You do you. My question is this. Did you actually say that to the client?
No. No, I'm just thinking that in my head.
Okay.
But nobody makes me quote my own quote.
Okay. Well, to quote Matthew McConaughey, it'd have been a lot cooler if you had.
But you can't just say you do you. It's you do you, girlfriend.
Okay.
I think my silence probably spoke volumes of just.
Very good. All right. So to sum up this episode, what do we take away from this, Alexa?
Here's what we know.
Final word.
Here's what we know. We know that Georgia and a lot of other states look at pets as personal property. They are chattel. We know that the law is emerging in a lot of different states, including California, New York, Illinois, where pets are leaning towards the way of children, and we're talking about best interests, and we've got standards, and we've got different factors we're looking into. I personally think that's the way things are going to go as far as the law is going to develop, but I could be wrong.
And I think stay tuned for future episodes as we follow the law as it develops in other states and even in Georgia if we have the cases. And then also, if any of our listeners have any stories or anecdotes, we would love to hear them.
Oh, we'd love to hear your pet divorce stories. This would be fascinating to know in different states if you've had any dealings with any of these laws. I think that would be fascinating to know how it went, particularly in front of a judge.
Absolutely agree. In fact, we should reach out to Phil Tucker out in Edmond, Oklahoma, and ask him. In fact, I'll email him later on.
It's one I didn't look up, so I'm going to assume maybe personal property, but I could be wrong.
We'll find out. All right, does that conclude us?
That concludes us, and don't forget to follow Addie on Instagram.
All right.
That's it for this episode of Lawyers Without Billboards. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to follow and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more resources or to get in touch with us, visit shewmakerandlewis.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.